What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and we've got news that Heather Antos is leaving Valiant Comics, apparently for IDW, and that she's was having trouble getting hired over at DC Comics. Now, this is something that we've kind of covered here on the channel for quite some time. The amount of difficulties Valiant Comics has had since bringing Heather Antos on board after she was unceremoniously kind of dumped from Marvel Comics. She went into like esports betting and then returned to the comic industry to Valiant within a year. She wasn't out of the game too long, and now she's exiting Valiant, going to IDW. Now, there's a few things we're going to talk about. We'll talk about the Valiant portion. We'll talk about the IDW portion, and then I'll kind of hit on the DC stuff because it kind of confirms some stuff that I've heard through the grapevine about the way DC is being run right now. Now, Heather leaving Valiant is a good sign, sort of. A few weeks ago, maybe it was like 4 or 5 weeks, there were some weird tweets, all like from multiple people that were associated with Valiant at the same time. One of them being Heather Antos. I believe she said, something like, pray for me or keep us in your thoughts, kind of thing, like something was happening. And then there's some other like more executive type people at Valiant that had some weird tweets going on within the hour, like the exact same time. And I thought maybe Valiant was actually going to go under. I thought they were about to announce that they were no more. Never heard anything out of it. So I thought that was interesting. And finally, we do hear that Heather Antos I believe she's going to say she's resigning. Like she's put in her letter and she's moving over to IDW. I don't believe this for the most part. I think that they are having to cut some positions, and she was one of the people that is being cut, but they allowed her to, essentially say that she's moving on to a new opportunity rather than say that she was fired. Valiant is in a really bad place right now. They haven't really had any big hits. Now, when they relaunched that Bloodshot with Brett Booth and Tim Seeley, that did break records, at least on their first issue. I think before that, when they launched Livewire with Vita Ayala, that one had also broken records. But Vita Ayala's Livewire was also the first comic at Valiant that I believe Heather Antos was editing. And it was bad. Like really, really bad. If you go back there, this is like damn near character assassination. You got Vita Ayala with Heather Antos as the editor. It's essentially the blind leading the blind. And it completely spills out all over the pages of that comic. And it's really atrocious. So about the time that Heather's coming on board, before then, they've ousted the team that had relaunched Valiant Comics, Dinesh Shambasani, Warren Simmons, and the sales had already begun to crater, and they brought in Heather on board for her Rolodex, her contacts at Marvel Comics. Obviously, she had worked on the Star Wars line under Jordan White. If you read Star Wars, you probably have a negative opinion on her ability to edit. I think for the most part, a lot of people within Marvel had a negative opinion, but Valiant decided to bring her on board because she had contacts. And since then, we've seen a who's who of people that don't like the same people she does. We've had like a Mags Visaggio book. We've had a B. Clay Moore book, among others. I think there's a few other creators, and it felt like one of the big things that you needed to do to get a spot at Valiant with Heather Antos as somebody that was an influencer there was like to really dislike the same people she did. It turned out to be a very bad gamble. The sales have dwindled. So back in the day, Exo Man of War, Bloodshot, Ninja K, and Shadow Man, Harbinger, Rye, they all kind of sold pretty well. They weren't always out at the same time, but those were kind of like your main series title. And then there was one title that was always just a terrible performer. It was Faith. Faith from Jody Houser. I always feel bad for Jody Houser. She gets the worst projects. So you always have like the upper crust performing projects, maybe some stuff in the middle. Then there's always Faith at the bottom. Well, now everything is kind of down where Faith is. Exo Man of War, Bloodshot. I think even Rye, which was one of their better selling comic books, while Heather was there is dropped significantly as far as selling power, just because the entire line has been trash. And I don't blame that all on Heather Antos. It was already going downhill before she arrived. When Harbinger Wars 2 started, which would have been 4 months before she arrived, the storytelling just across the board had already gone to crap. But once she arrived on Livewire and she became one of their key employees, it just really went to crap. And she's been a senior editor for quite some time. The writing's been on the wall for Valiant. Like I said, we saw those tweets. It sounded like something bad was happening there. I believe this has something to do with her leaving. I'll call it an ouster. Before that, with the executive editor, the person that would have been above Heather, and there's another senior editor. Can't remember her name right now. Hawkins. I think it's Lisa Hawkins, the other senior editor. He would have been in charge of them. He'd already left to another publisher, kind of, I guess, saw the writing on the wall. Now the rats are kind of like abandoning ship over Valiant Comics. It feels like the damage has already been done. They're not really publishing a whole lot right now. I think in April, May, they might be publishing 2 or 3 comics during those months. They'd already had I think a 6-month gap where they didn't publish anything. Once Diamond Comics shut down, they finally kind of got back up. Exo Manowar, which is their flagship title, does not come out monthly anymore. It just kind of comes out sporadically. There's no Bloodshot right now. I'm pretty certain there's not a Bloodshot series out. We heard that there was going to be a Ninja K. We haven't seen that one. I think Cullen Bunn's Shadow Man is supposed to come out this month. I might be wrong on that one. But it's really erratic, and none of their big flagship titles are out there. So Valiant, I think the damage has been done, and I do think Heather Antos plays a big part in that. She didn't bring much to the table. Let's just say that. She brought Max Visaggio and B. Claymore to the table. Not a track record of success. Now, there were, Brett Booth, Tim Seeley, Dan Abbott, some better creators that weren't completely past their prime, if they ever had a prime. In some of the cases of the creators they brought in, they never did. So there were some pretty big name creators, but it wasn't enough to save the line. Now, Heather is moving over to IDW. And if you remember right here on the channel, Joe Corallo, award-winning editor and writer, and I had talked about one of the moves that IDW had made recently that was really promising. When DC Comics kind of had their Bloody Friday, their bloodbath, where they fired essentially a majority of their editorial staff and a lot of their executives that didn't fit the vision of what DC wants to do, moving in the future. One of the people they let go was a very popular editor named Mark Doyle. He was the man on Batman for a long time. He's the one that got Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo together. He was removed from Batman due to Tom King being a bit of a diva. If you read the story, more like an asshole. But he had also worked on some other projects. He was the man behind DC Black Label, which has been pretty successful in there for quite a while because of the price tags and the interest in some of those titles. It's been watered down now. It was really keeping DC Comics afloat until, I guess Batman 3 Jokers was Black Label as well. But, Joker War and some of the stuff in the mainline titles were more successful. But Mark Doyle was kind of a big get for IDW. And Joe and I had talked about this was going to open some gates to them to have some higher profile creators that could come in and maybe do some creator-owned work, which is something they need to do because they want to get into television and movie properties. Can't really do that with their licensed stuff because that all belongs to other people. If you don't own the properties, there's not a whole lot you can do as far as mediums outside of comic books. So they need new IPs to become popular so they can, get some of the pie when they push those things to streaming and movies. And that's something that IDW has lost in a substantial amount of currency, and it causes them severe financial woes, continues to do so, even though there are some more positive signs, at least for IDW moving forward. So we thought Mark Doyle coming in there, would have access to a lot of people that maybe worked on those successful Batman books and other things across DC Comics, and that Black Label specifically had a lot of big name creators. So that was going to be good. But he also would have access to these editors that DC Comics had to let go when they were cutting costs. So you would think they would have access if they needed to hire new editors over IDW. It's not that far away from where DC was in Burbank. You'd have some access to some people that that had done good work, and that Mark Doyle himself, who had been very successful, was comfortable working with in the future and bring him over to IDW, maybe up the quality as far as the books and the editing across the line. Why in the hell they would decide to bring Heather Antos, who essentially worn out of work, welcome, and got booted from Marvel Comics, went over to Valiant Comics, a smaller shared comic book universe, one of the few shared universes out there, totally tanked that, well, had a big part in doing so, brought in only the most shot, like past their prime creators. Okay, maybe Tim Seeley's still got the prime he's working in, and Brett Booth and Dan Abnett, but other than that, it was a dumpster fire. She did not bring anything to the table and tank sales. Why IDW would want to bring that into their corporate culture, which is already struggling mightily, I just don't understand. It is not a well-guarded secret that Heather Antos, while she was at Marvel, was extremely unprofessional, not well-liked by a majority of the people she actually worked with, and was generally considered to be a very, very poor editor. With that information out there, you wonder, well, why does she keep getting work? That's a good question. The reason that she keeps getting work is it's perceived that she's on the right side of history, right? The right people dislike her, or she's made enemies of the right people. And to not give her new opportunities would be like siding with Richard Meyer, that she was unqualified to begin with to get her job. So she keeps getting these opportunities. Now, why IDW is wading into that, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure who's at IDW that's like, yes, let's bring in the dumpster fire into our editorial staff that's, got unceremoniously booted from Marvel Comics, had to leave the industry, came back to Valiant, and absolutely destroyed a really cool small publishing line, or had a big hand in doing so. IDW has decided to bring that aboard their corporate enterprise, and I believe it will be to disastrous results. And it's too bad because it feels like IDW is kind of on the rise. The TMNT, The Last Ronin stuff, obviously is doing very well. It feels like the Kanto team, David Booher and Drew Zucker, have built their little universe. It's being adapted into movies. That's something that IDW needs to be a part of. And so they're getting some wins finally. They're still losing money, but they're not losing as much money. And those are all positive signs. And now you're going to bring somebody that will undoubtedly smear your readers, embarrass your company, and do everything in her power to make her a bigger story than all of your comic books and creators. Because that's the thing that Heather does better than anything in the industry. She makes herself the story. You would hope that the editors would just sit behind the scenes and you wouldn't really notice them. You're just like, wow, that's a really good comic book. And then all of a sudden, maybe over time, people are like, every time this person's name is on this comic, it's well executed. They must be a good editor. No, that's not what she does. She's out in front of the book, embarrassing herself, embarrassing the company, admonishing readers, always taking a hardline stance on the most stupid positions possible, just to keep herself in the story, because she is about keeping herself in the spotlight. And that gets us to DC Comics. Apparently, I had not heard this rumor, but I'll believe it. They're saying that Heather has been trying to exit Valiant and go to DC Comics for some time, and that DC Comics will not have her, specifically for the Jay Lee incident. If you remember, not that long ago, we definitely covered that here on the channel. Tom King went out of his way to disparage Jay Lee for illustrating a cover for Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog campaign. Now, Jay Lee at the time was like, I'm not on social media. I don't even know what you're talking about. They paid me to draw a cover. I presented the cover. And at the time when Tom King, because Jay Lee had done a cover for, I believe, Rorschach #1, probably the best-selling cover out there besides the A cover, he decided he was going to use that as his opportunity to go out there and virtue signal about the evils of Jay Lee, one of the nicest guys in the industry, somebody that people generally don't have anything mean to say about because he kind of keeps to himself and he's just very professional. That did not turn out very well for Tom King. Like, he was, from what I'm told, and he was behind the scenes, he got his PP slapped and he had to go out there and publicly apologize. And from what I hear, Tom King's days at DC Comics are likely numbered in months. They're waiting for him to exit. And I guess he was hoping to transition into a successful screenwriting career, but obviously that's not happening with the New Gods movie falling through. But another person that decided to jump wholeheartedly into the Jay Lee non-controversy, really, the fact that he, as an artist, was paid to create art and did it, i.e. he did his job, was Heather Antos. She never apologized. She just kept wading into it and saying more and more things that were more and more incendiary about Jay Lee. And that was not endeared her to Jim Lee and some of the other staff at DC Comics. They already made Tom King, somebody that's proven to make them money. They made him apologize. Heather Antos has never made anyone a dime. Why would they want to bring that up into their corporate culture, right? So DC's doing the right thing. And, I've heard some rumors behind the scenes that although DC seems to be in a bit of a disarray, we had a lot of older creators moving out, and I believe Tom King will be one of them. And they're bringing in cheaper talent. The new leadership there, not so much Jim Lee, but Marie Javins, I believe Daniel Cherry, have been much more forthright when their feedback, and specifically negative feedback with people. And they're just, you can call it a blacklist if you want, but they have a list of people they don't want to work with because they think they're difficult or they think they're going to bring negative press to the publisher. And Heather Antos' name appears to squarely be on there, and I'm not surprised. I say good on you, DC Comics. We'll see what happens. I'm not extremely excited about what's going on with DC Comics, but I was, it's good for DC. It's good for them to take a stand and to look out for the other creators. You don't want people that are in there like bashing their coworkers and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the reasons that you're going to see Tom King exit. I think they'll be glad to have him to see him go, especially with all the damage he did to Batman. Of course, he's doing some really weird stuff on some strange adventures. And what else? Batman, Catwoman. Oh, it's just dreadful. The worst is Rorschach. But is it the worst? Maybe Batman, Catwoman is worse. But Rorschach what the hell is that comic? Like Tom King lost it. He lost it big time. I think it's meta commentary on bad comic books, which is hilarious because Tom King writes some of the worst comic books like in the industry right now. Like he and Bendis are neck and neck. I don't know if you can explain to me what the hell Rorschach's about and what it's leading to. I would love to hear it. So that is the news. Heather Antos is leaving Valiant Comics. It's probably too little, too late. I think Valiant's days were already numbered. It seemed like there was something was going on. I believe they tried to cut some fat and try to save what they could right now, but they just aren't publishing enough right now. They certainly weren't selling enough before, and the numbers are really, really bad. She is c'est la vie, but she has found a nice soft landing spot in IDW. I find it shocking that IDW, after the big win to bring Mark Doyle on board, would decide to bring in somebody that is an absolute train wreck, never sold a comic book, has a track record of being a poor editor, also inciting fans and trying to make themselves bigger than the brand. I don't know why you'd want to bring somebody like that in, but somebody at IDW obviously was pounding the table on Heather Antos' behalf, and I think it will come back to bite him in the ass, just like it did Valiant Comics, and likely like it did at that esports betting. There's a reason she probably left that in short order. It's because she's not very professional and she's not very good at her job. And we do have word that DC Comics wanted nothing to do with her. They know that she's bad for the brand. She's bad for business. She's not a good editor. She's going to disparage other talent. She's going to be controversial for all the wrong reasons. And she's going to bring, bad press to your business. So DC Comics did the right thing. I wish IDW had, but it's time for Heather Antos move on. I personally love Valiant Comics. I would love to see them return to their former glory, but I don't see that happening in the near future. It does feel like a sinking ship, and the rats are exiting.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.